but they often feel really under-supported as they're going through an acquisition and then into that post-acquisition integration period, which can last anything from 3 months to 3 years, quite frankly, depending on how the business manages it. So I've been thinking a lot recently about the challenges that occur as a result of organisational change. And of course, there are many, but in this short video, we'd like to share one particular challenge with you, which is the dilemma that senior leaders face when an organisation goes through an acquisition. So an acquisition is arguably the biggest challenge an organisation can go through from a change point of view.
Yeah, and it's really interesting actually, because I'm interested in the coaching side of this and how we can really bring a coaching style and approach in a very practical way when change happens. So that's sort of the subject of our talk today. Just really want to sort of explore that in a bit more. Amy, tell me more about acquisitions and change and what the particular challenges for leaders are.
Yeah, I think the role of leadership, in particular senior and executive leadership here, just to be specific, I think poses a lot of challenges, both leading up to an acquisition taking place, and then afterwards when the acquisition is being integrated into the purchasing organisation.
Yeah, and tell me more about where do you see the particular challenge for leaders in terms of that?
Yeah, so the main things that I've seen and that I would like to suggest people watch out for, senior executives, for example, let's say it's the CEO in this case, or if it's a larger organization, it could be the managing director of that particular division. But they often feel really under-supported as they're going through an acquisition and then into that post-acquisition integration period, which can last anything from 3 months to 3 years, quite frankly, depending on how the business manages it. And the reason they can feel under-supported is there's so much to do. They have a day job, and their day job, amongst other things, is to make sure that the business case that the acquisition was built around actually comes to fruition. Then they've got all these extra tasks on top, like managing the integration itself. You've got the IT integration, harmonizing pay and benefits for the new people coming in, lining up finance reporting. It's all a major distraction. So I've come up with a couple of really simple change solutions, Sue, and I know that there are also some coaching solutions that we can layer on top of that.
Wow.
But for me, from a simple change practitioner point of view, make sure that an acquisition is treated as a project. Set it up as a project, allocate dedicated project or change resources, at least for the first 6 months. Make sure the structure's well governed, you've got an executive sponsor, a steering committee, and reporting. That's just doing the basics right.
Yeah, and that just sort of is a really practical way of managing this. And you mentioned there about leaders are very rarely supported through this. And I really sort of echo that, because the higher up in the organisation you go, the less support you get. And so it can feel as if leaders are quite isolated. Who do they turn to actually talk about any concerns that they have? There is this assumption that all leaders are confident in what they're doing. But often it's sort of hidden by not wanting to admit some of it, because what will others think? And it might sort of damage their own sort of identity and security in a way. So this is where the executive coaching comes in really well, and is a fantastic way to support leaders in any level really, but particular senior leaders when they're in that position. So working very closely with a sort of trusted coach, they can then really be very honest about what's going on for them. And the coach will help them navigate that very complex role that they have. The coach isn't there to give them solutions. It is for the coach to help the individual they're with, the senior leader, to come up with the solutions which is best for them. And then they're going to have far more buy-in and sort of responsibility to that as well. the coach might may say, look, I've been thinking of this, because they're seeing it from a much wider perspective, and they won't know the organization as like the senior leader does. But that's good, because then they're not going to be bringing in any preconceived ideas, so they can work at a very sort of unbiased and impartial level with the senior leader. So, I mean, that's just sort of a few things. How does that sound for you?
Well, that all makes perfect sense. And what I'm now thinking and wondering is, could a change practitioner carry out that role, or would you really specifically need a highly trained executive coach to come in and do that?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because for me, it raises a few concerns, but also I like to think about possibilities as well. So the concerns I have is about how trained is the change practitioner in coaching. If they have done a qualification course in coaching, or are highly skilled in that arena, then it is possible that they could actually support the senior leader. The other thing I would be concerned about is, how well does that change practitioner know the senior leader? Because that can get in the way in terms of challenge. If they're quite friendly with that person, they could offer a coaching support in some ways, but they may not feel confident to challenge for fear of upsetting them. There's also the thing about, if they are internally employed, if the change practitioner is employed by the organisation, then they know an awful lot. And that can lead to a conflict of interest, and also it might get in the way of that impartial questioning technique. So it is possible if they have the right techniques, but I'd say that there are so many sort of ethical dilemmas and boundaries that might get in the way. It may be best for the senior exec to seek an external coach who doesn't know them, who gets to know them, but actually on a personal level, in terms of what's going on for you, what are your limiting beliefs, what is actually stopping you from achieving this particular project or a particular goal.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, having been through an integration project a couple of years ago. I think, to your point, if it is an internal change practitioner, it's much harder, because they come with baggage. They know, they know a lot about the organisation and the culture. Maybe if it's an external person, they're more likely to have that impartiality and to have fewer preconceptions about the organisation and the stakeholders involved. That was one thing that popped into my head. The other thing was, if an external coach were to come in and start working with let's say the executive sponsor and potentially even the whole of the steering committee, that's something that could be done before the transaction goes through. That's a nice activity, actually, for bedding in a new group of stakeholders while they're in the getting to know you phase.
Yeah, and actually what it brings up is this the team coaching side of it. And so an external person could work individually with the steering group, but also bring them together at some point, either before or during or after, to actually say, so how are we working, or how are you working as a team, and what is it that you want to achieve from this, and how can you support each other? Because again, I think sometimes there can be personalities which get in the way. Sometimes there's a bit of status, which leads to egotism. And so it's really for the coach to notice this and being able to hold the mirror up to the team to say, what's going on here? How can you possibly go forward if there are these things getting in the way? So, what the coach can do is to help the team to work really collaboratively in order to get a really good outcome, and sort of break through some of their own sort of change challenges as well.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, because in that lead up to the acquisition being made, and even in the months thereafter, the two groups of senior leaders that are being thrown together via this acquisition probably don't know each other very well. So that makes me wonder then, what's the difference, or is there a difference between team coaching and group coaching, and how do they both differ from facilitation?
Yeah, oh wow, huge subject actually. How much time have we got? Because, yeah, I mean, if you read the books about team coaching, facilitation, group coaching, there's still a lot of confusion. So, I mean, I'm going to give my take on this. And what you described there was absolutely key. So when you have an acquisition, if you have those two groups of people coming together, that would be described as a group initially. So the coach would work with the group to help them define themselves as a team, possibly, but also with group coaching, there may be sort of other dynamics going in. So if that team of, let's say, leaders are going back to their own teams, then they may have their own specific goals they want to achieve. But there may be an overall group goal which they want in terms of, we need to know how we're going to work together going forward. And actually, one of the goals could be, how do we define ourselves as a really strong collaborative team? And then when that happens, when that point of we are now see ourselves as a team, then the coach would work with that group as a team in a very different way, because then they can see themselves as being a different sort of dynamic, if you like, within that team. You mentioned facilitation. So, yeah, I mean, there's some sort of crossover, if you like, with group coaching and facilitation. And the difference tends to be that the facilitator will be brought in by HR, let's say, and to saying, I'd like a group of these people to, let's say, managers, we want to work on this particular theme. And the facilitator will bring in preconceived tools and techniques to work with them in a day, let's say. There may be a follow-up. But with team coaching particularly, and even group coaching, the coach will work with that group and that team over a number of weeks and possibly months. So it is almost as if when I'm working with a senior leader, I am meeting that person over a number of months. And that is, again, replicated with a team. I'm meeting with them over a couple of months. And it's the team who decide the goal, the team who actually agree what it is they want without any tools or techniques from me as the coach, because that means I'm driving it instead of them driving it. So that's how I see the difference.
So how does that work then? Because I understand that with an individual coaching relationship, there's a quasi contract in place. How do you get that type of dynamic in place in a group? And does it depend on them all agreeing to participate?
Yes, and again, I mean, when you have a team of people, it's easier because then they can see themselves as supporting each other. Not quite so easy. So that's part of the complexity of having a coach who knows what they're doing and a facilitator who can work with groups. In a way, because it's also being able to feed back any dynamics which they notice. So the contracting is absolutely key. And it's important that everybody buys into that process. And that's where the difficulty comes. So the contracting could actually take a big part of the session if there's anybody with resistance. And how I would manage that is I would like to take away that person or a couple of people who might be resistant and work with them at a level which is, tell me what's going on here. What are your concerns? What do you want to say but not saying? What are you fearful of? And all of those sort of things.
Yeah. It definitely sounds to me like there's a massive opportunity here for any kind of change intervention to be married up with a coaching intervention and a set of coaching solutions. And if that coaching intervention can be carried out by a qualified exec coach, so much the better. But I definitely think there's also an opportunity for change practitioners just to embed some of these techniques in their day-to-day toolkit.
Yeah, and definitely. And if they can work at a very impartial level, there's no reason why they couldn't actually learn these skills and manage some of these team situations. The beauty of using somebody internally is it's much quicker. They don't have to get into a contract with an external provider. They don't have to find a provider. They actually have somebody there on tap who can say, we really need to get together. When are you next free? And so being able to build rapport immediately, but also have the confidence to deal with any of sort of the difficult, maybe challenging conversations which may come up with that team is absolutely key. And an external contractor may be able to do that more easily because they're not part of the system. They're not having to manage other dynamics in the organisation either, and then go away and still be within the organisation, and how they're then perceived by this group or this team. So quite complex in many ways, and I think it's sort of not really overlooked the power of coaching and team collaboration as well, and how challenging it can be.
Yeah, I completely agree, and this is a theme that arises throughout the book that we've written, isn't it? And we explore via different scenarios, challenges and dilemmas. So why don't we say a bit about that?
Good idea, yeah. And also, shall we introduce ourselves at this point?
Yes, well volunteered.
Okay. Well, I'm Sue Noble, and I have my own training and coaching business, and so I'm an executive coach. I train people in how to coach, particularly internal coaches as well. And so I bring into this the coaching aspect, and really helping people to understand just by learning some very simple techniques, but then can be refined at a later date in terms of actually possibly a change practitioner actually becoming qualified as well. So Amy, what do you bring to the book?
Well, I am on the other side of the coin, if you like. I'm a business transformation professional. I work in the London market insurance sector, and I've worked across a number of different insurance clients and have seen a variety of different challenges and barriers to change along the way. I currently have a team of project and change managers, and together we deliver a range of initiatives from technology to process and regulatory change. And really, I come to this book from a place of change management techniques are great, but how can we complement them and fuse them with other capabilities to deliver and embed sustained change?
Yeah. So we're working on the title at the moment, but the whole theme of the book is business transformation, change and coaching solutions. And we've aimed it really at change practitioners or anybody within that change field, anybody who's a change ambassador, and really looking at, there's plenty of books out there on coaching, plenty of books out there on change, but actually, is there anything which is doing what we're doing? And we haven't yet found it. So it's really those practical tools and techniques to help change practitioners work much more effectively, if you like, or efficiently in their roles. So thank you everybody for listening. What Amy and I aim to do is to continue with this theme and produce some more YouTube videos on chapters within our book. So we look forward to seeing you then.
Absolutely. Stay tuned.
Bye.
Thank you.